So we'll get underway now. And once again, good morning to the 20 people who've just joined us in the past couple of minutes. We've got something like 75 people on board today, so you're all very welcome. Thanks for taking interest in Edgecam 2015 R1, which, as you probably know, was released in the past number of weeks, just after Christmas. So as ever, usual webinar rules, I guess. I know some of you are new to this, new to the webinar conferences, but because of background noise, we don't actually expect you to chat or use your microphones, not at the moment. We get a lot of background noise that interferes with audio on these webinars, so we much prefer if you typed in your questions on the right-hand panel. You can see on that bottom right-hand panel. And I'll try to respond to them at intervals throughout today's presentation. If I don't get round to your question, then fear not, the questions are actually stored, and once I complete and end today's webinar, I'll personally respond to each and every question that's been posed. Okay then, so we'll get underway. This webinar today should last approximately 30 to 40 minutes. It is being recorded, so if you do need a copy of this webinar, then please do contact me. It will also be on the website. You might want to send the webinar to colleagues who couldn't attend today's presentation. So, Edgecam 2015 R1. Let's talk about the first and major item, in my opinion, is the evolution of Edgecam Workflow. So, those of you who've been working with Edgecam for the past 2 to 3 years minimum will know that workflow has been very, very dominant in our software, and this now has become the de facto or the default interface for Edgecam. We feel it's the right way, and then certainly there's great performance boosting technology inside workflow. Edgecam is workflow, workflow is Edgecam. And to that end, if we just now look at the Edgecam launcher, you'll notice now that Classic Edgecam, as we formally refer to it, Classic Edgecam is now been retired off to the right-hand side. So you can still get there, you can still find it, but you will find probably at 2015 R2 that we completely retire Classic Edgecam as you know it. So it's very important that you grasp this new technology, as indeed the vast majority of our customers and indeed resellers are taking on board the technology. So what are we seeing? So we're seeing a slight change inside the actual launcher. You'll notice that the workflow icons, the typical 6 icons that we used to see, they've now been exchanged for 3 icons in 2015 R1, so we just had a little bit of a repaint there. But important changes within the workflow interface itself is that we'll now support Wire EDM. So we've supported obviously Wire EDM in Classic, but now that's now totally supported inside workflow. And for those of you working with Wire EDM, you'll now notice that we have Machine Simulator inside the Wire EDM license. So that's a very, very important step. So a little bit of a clean up there on the Edgecam launcher. You'll notice a new settings button. I've just noted that on the arrow there, the yellow arrow. The settings button is basically your utilities where you set your file locations. But there's a newer item in there which will be of interest to many people, which is a thread editor, and this is a facility to add your own customized threads into Edgecam. So for instance, isometric only goes up to M60 or M70. You want to add some specials in there, then do so, and that will be recognized throughout Edgecam, Part Modeler, EWS, and also, and maybe more importantly, inside feature finding. So more enhancements connected with workflow is multiple setups. And this is a very, very important piece of work for our developers to complete. We know that inside Classic Edgecam we're able to create multiple sequences, and this wasn't possible inside workflow. So we've now taken that step. That's now perfectly possible. You can actually swap between milling and turning to wire, wire back to milling, all within inside one particular PPF file, so you've got multiple sequences. But what's maybe more important, and something you couldn't do inside Classic, was to pass the stock over. So your in-process stock that people will know used to only work with inside one single sequence, that now works across all the sequences. So you're actually passing the stock out of one sequence and onto the next sequence, and that's very, very important in terms of toolpath creation. Also, what we see is the creation of themes. So in previous releases of Workflow, the ribbon bar, as we call it, the ribbon bar has been customized. So you've been able to add your own macros, move your own cycles into your own preferred positions, but this has become more customizable. When you save that particular interface, we'll now call that a theme, and the theme is transferable. You can push that theme out of your kit and give it to a colleague and share the theme around the network. And again, I'll be showing you this as we move through today's demonstrations. So there's a number of items that we've discussed, so we'll just take a little breather there and we'll move into Edgecam, and we'll talk now about how these particular enhancements. So we see ourselves inside, obviously, Edgecam, inside the workflow environment. This is actually a Wire EDM part. We're just Wire EDMing the inside of that particular part. We can see the feature of the internal area. And what you'll notice maybe straight away is that a multidiscipline sequence is now being offered to us. In this case, the addition of the wire sequence. And here we see the usual create sequence, except this time it's obviously biased for wire. We see all our post processors, which are factory shipped from our Wire EDM license. And again, what we'll see as we move a little further along is the selection of the material. Don't forget, for those of you who do have the Wire EDM license, this is factory approved and this is technology approved coming from the actual controller. So this wording, this language is actually owned by Sodic or through AGI or whomever you tend to work with. So this is now fully supported. As you can see, those of you who do work in Wire EDM, you'll understand and you'll appreciate the technology. If I move into manufacturing, we've still got on the top left hand side the wire setup and the feature finding, but now more importantly you'll see that we've got the machine simulation. So it's the Edgecam machine simulation that we know and love. You'll obviously see the sequence browser down the left hand panel, but clearly now this is in Wire EDM, so it gives the Wire EDM people that extra check to make sure there's no collisions and obviously that they're getting the right sort of shapes. So that's Wire EDM now covered inside the workflow environment. So let's have a look at some more examples. I mentioned about multiple sequence and being able to share stock and exchange fixtures from one sequence to another. So here we see a typical milling part, 2.5D milling parts, feature found. We have vices, we have the stock, and so on and so forth. What you may notice there is that we've actually got a new vice added to the fixture manager. And perfectly normal. We see our CAM instructions. We take this into the machine simulator. Just wait for a GoToMeeting to catch up. And yeah, again, we just machine as normal in this particular sequence. So clearly what we'd want to do with this next part is turn it around, redatum it, new CPL, and begin to work on the next phases. So that wasn't possible in previous workflow editions. Now it is. And this is how we're going to see how it's done. So we move back to setup. We say create a new milling sequence. Pick our post processor in the normal way, maybe a toolkit. More importantly, select the right initial CPL. So it's in this position that Edgecam sees, or Edgecam lines up the axis and move further forward. So what we've done is we've exchanged the vice, which is now reclamped in the right position. It's obviously moved the component into the right position, and it's transferred everything, including the stock, over into over into this particular environment, over into the second end environment. So if we were to just work in the normal way, we do some more feature finding, obviously on that second datum. There's just some open pockets here, and they're dedicated to that datum. We'll just do some machining. I'll use the machine feature command. I'll just go ahead and digitize these two open faces. And in the usual manner, Edgecam automation using the machine feature command will go forth, select the tools and select the cam instructions for us. But as you can see on the left hand side, that's probably very familiar to you where you see two sets of sequences. But please remember that the fixtures and the stock from the first sequence, they're being transferred through into this particular sequence. So everything is being kept up to date. So we've now created our cam instructions, 16 cam instructions. In the usual manner, you'd move into machine simulation and obviously notice how we are seeing the recognition of multiple sequences. And we'll obviously just select the first sequence and we'll see this machining taking place. What you'll notice in the options area, you've now got the ability to say stop at the next sequence. So if I come out of this sequence and ask it to go back to machine simulator, I'll add every sequence. So we'll move now into machine simulator with both the sequences. And this isn't limited, obviously you could have many other sequences set on a part. And we'll just play through in this first sequence. Again, the screen's a little bit slow just as GoToMeeting catches up. But what you should be seeing at the moment is cam instruction 4 on down through to hole drilling. So we've just seen the normal machining, but notice now how it's exchanged, it's moved, it's reclamped and relocated, it's updated the stock for us, and now we can move ahead and start beginning to machine the second sequence. Okay, so that's complete. And remember, because you've got both the sequences here, again look at the top left hand side, if I were to double click the first sequence, Edgecam will take me back to that first sequence, and then double click, that'll take me back to the next sequence. So this is workflow, and this is the ability to create multiple sequences throughout workflow. So obviously what's good for the millers must be good for the turners, and again this is a very practical example that we use here. We've machined our first end inside turning, we wish to reverse maybe into soft jaws, take that piece of stock as well and begin to machine for the second end. So again what we see here is typical C and Y, 2-axis C and Y machining. We'll see our 17 cam instructions. We'll just move that through into machine simulator. I'll just play that through. And we're seeing just the normal everyday machining. Okay, so now what I want to do is reverse that and take that through into the second sequence. So again, as we did before, we'll do create sequence, a new turning sequence. We'll pick our lathe, in this particular case just using some of the sample stuff that's in here. Obviously if we wish to, we can pick the tool kit. But what's more important here is the initial CPL, as in milling, it lines up the axis. And here we're noticing, and the turners will recognize this particular terminology, back turn. So this is a new back inverse turn CPL, which is automatically created on your behalf when we do this second CPL. So we'll just do a little bit of different stick out, and I'll just ask it to clamp a little bit further down the bar. So we're establishing our second sequence. Notice now how that's swapped around, and more importantly the stock's been transferred. That's very important. Keep the stock always up to date. Don't want to cut the fresh air. Let's keep it up to date. We've just done my feature finding, and again just for completeness I'll use the machine feature command. Just use some automation in Edgecam again. I'm as lazy as the next person, and we'll just allow that to just do some roughing out for us. And as we found inside milling, we get the same in turning, the automatic selection of tools, and if we look at our machine simulator, it will obviously recognize there are multiple sequences here, and this will just machine this end for us. If I wanted to machine all ends, and again remember I can jump to the first sequence, make a change, it would update the stock, then maybe jump back to the second sequence. If I again move into machine simulator, add all, so this time I'll do the whole of the part inside the machine simulator, and just take that through. So we'll have our machining of the first end. Notice how it just swapped for us, and now we'll do the machining of the second end. Okay. And of course I can repeat that for multiple sequences. I could now take this part, which is obviously a turn part, and take that into a milling environment. This is the stock for my mill component, so it's completely exchangeable and everything is associative. So just before we leave this part, I'd just like you to draw your attention to the theme area on the top right hand side. So in this particular case, I could use the default theme, which is what everybody would be using at the moment. If I go for a different theme, you'll notice that my icons will change very slightly. And I have some different icons here on my left hand side. And of course, as we've seen in previous releases, and I'll just do this as a bit of a refresher, reminder, I want to add some more commands to my theme A. So of course what we do here is we would simply select one of the functions and just call this over. So we'll just do a add. There's a new item here that we can search for the command. It does sometimes become very frustrating where you're trying to find a specific function and you're having to go through the list. So just by typing in the first number of letters of that particular function you're thinking of, it will jump down to that area for you, and we'll add that one again, rough groove. So this is the customization of the ribbon. You'll now notice under that theme I've now got some extra items, and I could now with that particular theme save the theme, just overwrite it from before. And of course I could export the theme, so I could give this theme to a colleague, or maybe I've got a new kit and I want to preserve this interface. So this is very much like what you might want to make a parallel to with .config files in classic Edgecam. Everything is now exchangeable, everything within the workflow environment. You can customize this ribbon. This ribbon is called a theme. And of course, if you wish to import a theme, import a theme, this is zipped up for you. So I've just selected one that I've saved on a previous kit. You'll see it's called a zip theme. Everything is zipped up nicely for you. We just move ahead. We'll create and bring in every icon in that theme. Copy and replace, and OK. Now that theme would be imported for us. Here we see the name of that theme, which is called Workflow. Now it'll just bring in different icons for me. Go back to the default theme, so that will set it up as we saw before. Okay, so that concludes that first little presentation. Just reviewing new items inside Workflow. Just going to move back to the PowerPoint. And as I do that, I'm just going to review maybe some of the questions that we're getting. So I'm just going to mute the microphone for a moment, just as I begin to look through some of these extra questions that you may have asked me. So just 1 minute as we just review. Okay, so I'm back. We're just having a look through some of the questions, or I should say lack of questions. Not many questions coming out this morning. There is one question about, is it interchangeable between wire EDM and turning? Yes, so everything that you've just seen, the stock, the fixtures and so on and so forth can be transferred between all those three different types of disciplines. But do remember, if you've got some questions, and feel free to ask, just type it into the chat window on the bottom right hand side. Okay then, so it looks like we can move further ahead now in our presentation. Now we're going to have a look at again a new-ish item. This was released at 2014 R2. It's Edgecam's solid modeling system inside Workflow. So again, another piece of technology exclusive to the Workflow environment is this modeling system, which again is free to use for all users. We've got some very interesting and exciting enhancements inside EWS, so let's have a review of those straight away. So the first thing that we see, maybe the most important enhancement, one of the biggest questions asked of us at 2014 R2, was the inclusion of DXF and DWG files. It's very, very common to take a 2D drawing and then take it into a modeling system and begin to convert it into a model. So that's now fully supported in 2015 R1. We are supporting sketch planes. We used to previously support automatic sketch planes on a flat surface. This is now fully supported on a cylindrical surface, and we've also added two new commands to make life easier for you. Rather than repeating work, we can now copy and circular array procedures that you've previously created inside EWS. Internal external threads have been added, again very, very important for feature finding. If you have created a diameter, you want to say that's a tap tool or that's an external thread for turning, that's now possible inside EWS. And lastly, a little extra command inside sketching, the ability to just sketch out a polygon. So we've had obviously circles and rectangles. So it's just another quick shape command to create a sketch. So there are a couple of other items inside EWS, but let's just go and have a look at this in the flesh. So we're back to Edgecam. I'm going to open up a DWG file, and straight away this is loaded as always into Edgecam. We should know and appreciate that a DXF and a DWG file has come from a third party. We've no idea how they've been created, but one thing we do know is that they'll have layers in them, and that's the first thing that EWS begins to address. So I click EWS, straight away we're into the EWS software. But what you will notice down that left-hand panel is layers, and this gives us the opportunity to dismiss the layers that we're not interested in. So anybody who's worked with DXF and DWG, you'll fully appreciate that there's a lot of information in there that's of no use to us. So now we're nearly down to the bit that we're interested in. This is the upper bit that we're interested in. You can probably recognize this is a turn part, and I'll just identify that this is the area that we want to use. So now we've just probably gone and saved ourselves an hour of sketching because we've been able to import a DXF or a DWG file. So that's a very, very big boost in speed and time. So we'll just revolve this part as we normally do in EWS, and thanks to having the sketch we've been able to evolve that into a solid model. So let's have a look at some of these other enhancements. I did mention the fact that we've got a polygon tool, so that's nice. It's just a quick way of sketching. And as we sketch, obviously we're always asked inside EWS where do you want to position the sketch, and in EWS in previous releases we've been able to just go up to the straight faces, the flat faces, and begin to design on that face. But what you'll now notice is I can go to cylindrical faces. So this gives us certainly an extra option. So we're going to go around, we're going to circular array on that diameter. But the sketch plane can obviously be edited if you wish to do so. We'll just line up on that sketch plane. That's better, I can see what I'm doing now. And we're in the middle of just sketching a polygon, so we'll just sketch away a polygon there. And we'll just do an extrude cut. So again, for those of you who are using 2014 R2 EWS, you're no stranger to the cut extrude command, but there are a new item inside the cut extrude command, you can now create a draft angle, and you can create a corner blend or a chamfer, a radius on the bottom of that blend. So this is again saving time. So it's done within as part of the procedure, and you'll see that on the right hand side. You'll see the fact that this has been added to that right hand side. So I'm not going to repeat that. I want 3 more of them. So that gives me the opportunity to show you the circular pattern command. And so all I do is explain this is the rotation axis, and this is the process that I wish to repeat. I'll do that 4 more times. And there we go. So again, with that new command, linear and circular, it's going to save a lot of time where you get repetitions in parts. And finally, I just want to show you the threading command. So the threading command, if I walk up to any diameter, internal or external, Edgecam will begin to create that thread for us. What you may notice is it's actually changing the size of the thread M64 on the small side and M127. And if you didn't have an M127, you could edit and place that new thread inside the thread editor. So we'll just create that, apply, OK, and so now we have that created inside EWS, where we'd obviously would save that and then move it back into Edgecam for machining. Obviously, in terms of Edgecam for machining, we'd be very interested in threads and other areas inside that particular part. So that would feature find. It'd just be treated in the normal way, whether it be an IPT or a SolidWorks or a PMOD file or whatever you care to mention. But what you'll notice is that the thread has now come, that internal thread has now been created inside Edgecam Feature Finder. Okay, so there's some very, very exciting enhancements from the EWS product, but that's a product that everybody gets inside Edgecam EWS. Okay, so we're going to move ahead to our next area. This next area is to do with milling enhancements, and then after that we'll do some turning enhancements. But again, I'll just stop, pause, take a breath. I'll review if there's any questions coming in, and then we'll move on again. So we'll just mute and pause for 1 or 2 minutes. Okay, I am back again, and so just one question regarding workflow and regarding Classic. The theme of the question is, if I have a PPF file, an Edgecam part file saved in Classic, can I open it in Workflow, and vice versa? The answer to that is absolutely yes, you can. Both are exchangeable. It is the same product at the end of the day, so yes, they are exchangeable. And when you open an existing part created in Workflow, will it default to Classic? Well, the answer is no. We're now defaulting everything to open up in Workflow. But if you wish to, remember on the browser, or rather I should say on the interface, we still now do have, or we've still preserved the ability to do Classic. So if you did want to open up that part that you're asking, you would now go to the Classic Edgecam and open it. But by default, a PPF file would now open inside Workflow. Okay, so we'll move further on. We'll just get ourselves ready here with the PowerPoint, and we'll start up the PowerPoint. That takes us to milling. Some very, very interesting items taking place in milling. And remember, these aren't exclusive just to milling. If you've got a mill turn license, you'll find that you've got these commands inside a mill turn license as well. So this first item, you may be forgiven for thinking that you're looking at a drill cycle, because inside a drill cycle you have an optimized path function. Well, the optimized path function has now been rolled out and included inside our roughing cycle and inside our profiling cycle. And I guess you'll know and appreciate why that is, because we want to and specifically order the manner in which items are actually machined. We don't want a tool hopping around from the top left hand corner to the bottom right hand corner, wasting time as it traverses across what could be a 6-foot work plane. We want it to go to the nearest neighbour. So that's now included inside both the roughing and the profiling cycle. A brand new cycle, maybe a little bit specialist, an engraving cycle. This isn't to be confused with the text machining cycle that we've had for many years inside Edgecam. You can create text, true type font text inside Edgecam, or just standard font, and machine it using the text machining command, or you can use a roughing cycle or a profiling cycle. This is a brand new cycle, very, very specific, where customer might have a certain font or a certain type of artwork to machine in, and I'll be showing you this very shortly as we move through into a live demonstration. We now support inside the milling environment the ability to power rotate the table. So that's to say, if I was machining a part, normally I'd see that part being performed in XY in planar. That can now be done in rotary, and obviously that gives us a greater scope in respect to not over travelling on a machine axis. And this is probably the most important, the most interesting one, I feel. Certainly in terms of saving time, this produces great benefits to us. This is all about lessening the amount of work you have to do in respect to preparing a file for manufacture. So before you create a CAM instruction, whether it be profiling, whether it be flatland, etc., you'll appreciate, or I have to do boundaries, I might have to do face features, etc., etc. Well, this is now taken away. That preparation now is becoming more and more minimal as we move through versions in Edgecam. So what we'll now find that we can directly select solid faces off a solid part file, and Edgecam will protect the rest of the unselected faces. Does that with a silhouette boundary. For all the other CAM instructions, for all other 3D cycles, you can now use a face for the boundary. So you don't have to keep creating edge loop features as boundaries. That's now performed by a face feature. If you want to use a boundary, by all means do so, but it's much quicker now to use a face feature. Okay, so let's take a look at those items. Just open up an item here. Let's just move back onto number 3, and we'll start with maybe one of the more simpler ones. As we look at this particular item, this item is to do with, as I said before, milling, and it's to do with the movement as we machine around the part. So what we see here in plain Edgecam is just a profiling cycle. As we move that inside to the machine simulator, you may guess what's going to happen is that we're going to go over axis, we're going to cause over travel. Now, I think I'll just turn that on here just to accentuate the problem. So stop at axis over travel, and we'll play through. So obviously we get an XY movement of that machine tool table. So the cutter's beginning to machine, but straight away you'll notice that we've stopped because of over travel. I just try and play it on a little bit. Obviously Edgecam's detecting the fact that from the code wizard, from the post processor, it's incapable of going that far. And so this would have been stop you in your tracks, and you'd have to think of an alternative method. What we have now inside milling, and maybe some of the turners would appreciate this and recognize this, is the ability to select the mill mode onto rotary. So where possible, Edgecam will now rotate the table in order to position profiling cycle. So if I go back into machine simulation, see how the table turned, and now we're machining using the rotary axis. So do remember that this again is obviously part of 2015 R1, but make sure that your code wizard, your post processor, gets upgraded into 2015 R1 to take on the new functionality and the new code constructors and tokens that support this particular enhancement. That's all it is, just the ability to swap between planar machining and rotary machining. The other item that we also spoke here, a little bit specialist, is the engraving cycle. Let's just dismiss this. Okay, so we've got 3 engraving cycles here. As you can probably tell, the cycle will work in 3D and also 2.5D, and the cycle also works in wireframe on solid features and directly onto surfaces or solids as well. Let's just look at the E and the C, just try to simplify this, but normally we'd see customers presenting with quite complex artwork or something that's been moulded. And all we want to do is drive the tool centrally down the letter E and down the letter C, more like a roughing cycle or a slotting cycle. So if I look at the first engraving cycle, that's what we're doing. We're picking the solid feature, it's been feature found, and I'm going down the center line. So I don't want the tool trying to generate and doing step over and taking a lot of time in respect to machining this part. I just simply want it to find the dead center and take out the bulk of material. The other item that we'll see in engraving is the finish, and this is very, very specialist. We tend to find that engravers will use a taper tool, and when the tool reaches a corner, internal or external corner, the tool ascends to the top and then descends, feeds down to the base, and it's actually forming the corner for us. Let's take that into the machine simulator. It's probably better off seen inside the machine simulator, and for purposes of this I'm just going to turn off the machine itself. So the first one is the slotting command. All I've simply done is ask the tool to select a center line. And so you'll see now it's just, if you will, roughing out that area for me in readiness for the finishing command to come. So I can just digitize the feature. It doesn't matter how complex that feature is, it will always find the center line for us. When we come to the next engraving cycle, this is a finishing cycle. This is very, very specialist to people who wish to do this type of work, wish to do engraving. What you'll notice is that the tool, as it gets into a corner, will rise and fall. Just maybe see that now, rises and falls. And that's just making sure that the corner is razor sharp. Rises and falls. So it comes to that letter C corner, and it's just formed it with the taper side of the tool. So again, that's something that is brand new inside 2015 R1 and could be found in both mill turn and turning milling environments. Let's look at the pocket ordering. Again, this will represent quite a substantial amount of time saving, especially on very large parts. You know, this part I've set up on a planer miller. This might be a 10-foot wing spar where I'm wishing to machine these individual features. We've been able to achieve this in the past in Edgecam. What we've had to do is manually select each feature, which, you know, if you've got 10 plus features looking at you, it can obviously take a lot of time. This is what we see. This would be the typical net result as the tool dances around the part. That can obviously be wasting a lot of time. What I want to do is it to go to the nearest neighbour. That's a terminology that we've heard inside drilling, nearest next. So that's what we're adopting inside profiling and roughing cycle. If we just edit this cycle, you'll see now inside control you have optimized path. If I say go X lace in the X direction and staying within 80 millimeters, now if I replay that command, so now you'll see it's now adhering to an X direction. It's not jumping around the part, and it's finding in the Y direction the next nearest neighbour. So it's a much more economical tool path, and on very large parts that will represent quite a substantial time saving. That's in the roughing, and it's in the profiling cycle as we see here, an optimize path command. Okay, so I'll save the best to last. This is picking faces, and I think this one's going to represent quite a very, very big significant time saving to all users. What we see here, and again I'll just hide away some of the toolpaths so things are a little bit clearer for us on the screen. So first of all I want to concentrate on the parallel lay cycle and on the constant cusp cycle. I'll leave my cursor on the constant cusp finishing cycle. You may notice that the actual tool is gouging into the part. which is not very good. So we know that when we machine in Edgecam, we pick faces or we pick the whole of the solid body, but by inference that means it's going to machine all the solid body or all the face, so we tend to use containment boundaries, and that means us having to prepare things. So here inside my feature area on my top left hand side, I've done a boundary for the parallel lay cycle to clip that inside, and I've obviously used the face feature to select the face. Well, these are now not necessary, and to prove that I'm going to delete them. And remember that by deleting them it will obviously put my 2 cycles in jeopardy, but I don't care, I don't need them anymore, and that's the whole point of having this direct picking command. So we look at the parallel lay cycle, that's the cycle on the left hand side. There's a new option, pick the solid face, and that's exactly what we'll do. We'll go directly to the face that I wish to machine. I'm not having to pre-prepare it or anything, it's straight to the solid body, select the face, and then let the cycle take effect. Now what you'll notice is indeed it has machined the command, so it's gone straight to the face, machined the command, which obviously inference means it's going to be associative, and also it's protected the sidewall. I've not had to use a boundary to pull it away from the remaining neighbour of the solid body. So it's actually using an internal, if you will, silhouette or an internal boundary to pull that toolpath away. If we look at the constant cusp finishing cycle, again you'll see that plenty of gouging going on there. This was originally created by creating a face feature, so I've actually gone into a feature finder scenario and done a face feature, and obviously that means more work for me, so I don't really want to do that work, as I'm as lazy as the next person. So I've removed that face feature. That's why the constant cusp cycles are currently in jeopardy, so it's good to see the red coming on and warning us. What I'm going to do is I'm going to edit that constant cusp cycle, and again notice that we have pick solid faces. So the inference is I can go straight to the solid face and select and select and finish. I don't need a containment boundary. It will just automatically create my constant cusp finishing cycle. And again, see how it's pulling the toolpath away, so it's protecting the rest of the solid body. So more intelligent machining and a lot less preparation in getting that cycle ready to manufacture. I'm just going to make these 2 other first cycles disappear, and I'm just going to turn on the profiling cycle, because some of you may appreciate that the profiling cycle in 2014 R2 already had a pick faces command. Just like to do some extra demonstration here. So in this case my profiling cycle is digitize the whole of the solid body, and clearly that's what it's done. It's machined all the solid body, including, you may notice, the chuck jaws, and I obviously want to correct that. So if I edit my profiling cycle, what I simply want to do in the first instance is pick the solid faces, and all I wanted to do is really just machine that central boss on that particular part. And that's exactly what it's done. So again, that's another very good example of not having to create boundaries, and obviously let the intelligence of the cycle decide which area it can reach, which area it can get to. So I've not had to create boundaries. But what you may notice, it's also gone and hit the vice jaw. Obviously not a very desirable condition. So what we'll now notice is that the profiling cycle is now enjoying what the roughing cycle has been doing for a number of versions, a use check fixture. So any recognized fixtures, whether it be solid bodies that you brought in yourself and declared them as fixtures, or in this case the fixtures have come from the fixture manager, but that will now correct my toolpath, pulling the toolpath away from the danger zone. So again, it's an extremely powerful command. So what we'll find is that 4 of the cycles have now taken on board that particular command, the ability to directly pick faces, and as time moves on we'll notice and observe that many other of the 3D cycles will begin to take on direct picking faces. But there is something extra that I'd like to show to you. This is where a face can perform the job of a boundary. So this is a project circular pattern command, very common command. This is one of the 3D cycles that at the moment hasn't got direct picking of faces, but it does have, like all 3D cycles, the ability to have a boundary. Let me just show you what I mean. I just clear the previous pics. So first question is the surface of the machine, so everything. Because it's a circular pattern command, it's asking for the outer arc. And then when it comes to the containment boundary, this would have normally been an edge loop feature, and you'd have to pick all the edges that were positioned around the part. Now what you may do is just go straight to a face or faces, and it will now make the face as the boundary. So it's a lot quicker than having to chain your way around edges and off loops off a solid body. It's a lot quicker now to work with the faces. So again, I'd recommend those enhancements to you in 2015 R1. Okay, so again, as before, we're just going to move into the turning section. Just before we do that, I'm just going to pause a little bit, take some fresh air. I'll give you guys a break and just review some of the extra commands that we see in the some of the questions that are coming through the chat window. So if you just give me 30 seconds, a minute, I'll just review these questions. Okay, so we're just looking at some questions that are coming in. There's actually lots of questions regarding what we've just seen, picking of faces. So and is it applicable across both environments, mill turn and milling? Yes, it is, and you can certainly try that out yourself. Again, there's a lot of questions actually about the webinar today about can you have the PowerPoint, can you have the recording? Certainly, yeah, that will be up on the website later on today, and we'll just try and see if we can get to another question without being too verbose. Yes, you can drag and drop on the ribbon bar. You can drag and drop the icons. So that's when we did the ribbon bar and creating a theme. Okay, I think, yeah, something a little bit specialist. So yeah, so if I'm not getting around to some of your questions, fear not, I will answer those over email or phone you later on today. But it's good to see that you're still all listening to me. You've not nodded off. We are on the final leg now. This is turning, as you can see on the PowerPoint slide. We'll just move on to turning. A couple of extra items inside turning. But what I've chosen to do here is maybe pick the biggest and maybe the best one. And that's waveform turning cycles, another brand new cycle which has been introduced at 2015 R1. Obviously for turners. Now millers will know the word waveform. In fact, lots of Edgecam customers will know the word waveform because this has been our world-beating machining algorithm which has been found inside the roughing cycle. Should be using that. Some great results from customers up and down the length and breadth of the country who are using Waveform. Well, this is now being adopted into a turning cycle, so what we're hoping to do is to share the benefits. This little screenshot that you see at the moment is a typical grooving cycle, but it's not exclusive to grooving. It is a turning cycle, but I borrowed this from our colleagues over at Sandvik. This is a typical grooving cycle where we stab, where we plunge into the part, and in lots of cases Sandvik and other business partners have been, Seco and so on and so forth, have been asking us to produce this waveform, or trochoidal if you will, algorithm. So that's now being produced inside 2015 R1. Brand new cycle. What does it do for us? Well, basically the algorithm always guarantees that you've got a constant load on the tool. You're not going to overload the tool. This is the same principle as we would find in milling, that the tool engagement angle is kept perfectly static all the way throughout the machining of the part, regardless of where it moves on a part. At the moment this is supported on round inserts, so it could be a grooving tool but with equal radiuses on it, or of course on a button tool, and of course it adopts a lot of the favourites that we see in normal roughing, in normal turning cycles, the use of lead and lag angles, and also current stock lead in and lead out. So again, some firm favourites in there. The benefits are the same as the benefits that you'd enjoy inside using waveform milling. That's to say that you get better tool life, because obviously you're not overloading the tool, and that you're able to increase feeds and speeds quite dramatically. I don't know if any of the audience today attended our open house last November in Coventry to DMG. We had a live machining example there, and I think we doubled the feeds and speeds using the waveform turning cycle. So let's have a look at it in all its glory. So we'll just clear the last file. I'll just open up the last file till today. Waveform turning. So the part that you're about to see has 3 cycles on it, 3 waveform roughing cycles on it, and obviously in this particular case you'll see it working on grooves. I just open up the first cycle. Let me just explain to you some of the parameters. Of course we get step over, which is a parameter that we've seen many times, but cut direction, always cut to the left or the right, or in the first instance we're lacing, we're going backwards and forwards. And we have obviously the current stock, which is a command that we know and love inside Edgecam, because we want to make sure that we're not always, that we don't want to cut fresh air. Let's just take these into the machine simulator, because I think we get a better impression of how the cycle behaves inside machine simulator. So the first one is lacing, or zigzagging if you will. And what you'll notice is always trying to, well, it's not trying, it's always keeping the tool engagement constant. And in this case the tool movement is laced forwards and backwards. Next one is always to a direction. So in this case we're always going towards the tail stock, we're always going to the right. So you want to do that maybe for chip control. And then the next one is just simply going all to the left. But again, what's more important here is to talk about the actual load of the tool, is that the load is always constant on that tool. If we actually look at the cycles themselves, we had a quick peek at one there at the beginning. Let's take a look at this last one here. So this is the material gone to the left using a 10% step over. You notice that you've got lead and trail angles. So this is just to back the tool off a little bit, so you're not actually going to jar the tool the deeper it goes into a groove. You may be able to see that there if I turn on the swathing function in Edgecam. Now you'll see that slightly better now, how it's relieved the sidewall the further it's gone down into the part. So that's what the lead and trail angles do. Give you some relief inside that area. But it's not exclusively just for grooves. If I take this cycle here, the first one, there's quite an important parameter which talks about how the cycle looks at the stock. And in this case, if I say we'll begin at the 0 degree, or if you will, begin at the 3 o'clock position. It will just do some regeneration for me. Now this will consider all the stock and the feature, and it will appreciate that to get to the feature it needs to clear the stock. So you'll now see now it's gone and crossed over that particular area, so it is used as a bona fide turning cycle. Don't be thinking it's just for grooving. You'll see this turning in this particular case. Okay, good. Alright, so we're nearly towards the end. I just wanted to spend the last couple of moments talking about some miscellaneous enhancements. So these, there's lots and lots of enhancements. Obviously we only get time to maybe pick out our favourites, but from a generic point of view I think this one's quite important. The fact that we now see the, I'll just move that out of the way I think. We've always had a feedback window, but now we're getting more specific information about the feedback window. So this is a typical information that we see inside turning. Yeah, but which cam instruction is causing rings are less than 40%? This is what you would have seen in 2014 R2, but now in 2015 R1 it's actually going to designate and specifically tell you which particular cam instruction is giving us that feedback. So that's very, very useful. And talking about turning, in turning you can now simply ask Edgecam to post-process the code generate for a single tool. So that's something that millers have had for a while, but certainly turners have been asking for that, and that's now been included inside 2015 R1. So you'll see that when you generate code. Of course, we've run out of time. There's lots and lots of different enhancements to take a look at. So again, I'd strongly recommend to you to have a look at what's new as ever. It's crammed, packed full of enhancements. Thanks for spending the time today to take on board this presentation. Apologies to those people who have not been able to get round to answering your question, but I'll do that through email later on today. And there will be an email announcement regarding taking this particular presentation and taking the download of this particular presentation. So thank you for your attendance today. Thank you for taking the time out. I'll be speaking to you again maybe in another 4 to 5 months with 2015 R2. But in the meantime, have a great weekend. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.